I bet your phone doesn't have an ultra-wide lens.
Oh yeah, it does, but I bet you don't have a 5nm chip.
Yeah, it does, but I bet you don't have a periscope lens.
Yeah, well it actually does, but I bet you don't have a dynamic island.
Actually, we do, but I bet you don't have under-display cameras.
Yeah, well we actually do, but I bet you don't have... Why are we doing this?
I don't know. This is kind of weird.
I feel like we all have the same stuff at this point, really.
Yeah, we kind of do. I guess we should just shake hands and be friends and admit that we all have pretty cool technology.
Yeah, you know, I guess that would be the mature thing to do. Are your bubbles green?
Hey, now, we talked about this. We talked about this.
Bubble. Ross Young recently detailed what he believes is the roadmap for Apple display improvements over time, and it kind of got me thinking, because essentially he's saying, like, iPhone 15 lineup's gonna be Dynamic Island across the board, but then in 2024, we might see the Pro/Ultra iPhone switch to no longer a pill, but more just, say, hole punch cutout, just one little camera hole at the top, and then the Face ID sensors, they'll make their way underneath the display, and then all of the iPhone 17s will all have that hole punch design, and then on the iPhone 18 Pro series, maybe at that point they can find a way to get the camera and Face ID sensors completely underneath the display. And maybe he's a little bit off on that, like it takes a couple more years for them to do it. And of course, Dynamic Island will have to be probably tweaked a little bit if there's more sensors underneath the display. But it got me thinking to how smartphones are all starting to borrow from each other. And, you know, there's Android mods that bring over the Dynamic Island and what have you, but seriously, like, a lot of what we're excited for with future smartphone upgrades is just for the model we want to gain a feature from a model we don't want. I feel like that's what a lot of excitement is surrounding, is like, boy, I can't wait for the Galaxy phone to get this silicon, or I can't wait for the iPhone to get this periscope lens that's already on another Android phone. And as hardware gets more and more mature and more peaked, I do think that we're slowly reaching that singularity where the difference in chassis design or display size is just going to be like fashion trends. But basically between Google, Samsung, Apple, maybe OnePlus if they're still kicking, it's just going to be a difference of logos and size. Like, this phone is the right size and all the chips are basically performing just as good. All the cameras are performing amazing. Honestly, I feel like we're kind of at that point with cameras already, but the gaps between different smartphone performances are going to get narrower and narrower as they already have been. And at that point, I think it really is just going to come down to operating system platforms, which is why I'm not that invested in reviewing Android phones all that much, because I know that a lot of you guys are like, it doesn't matter how cool the Android phone is, it's an Android phone, and I pick iOS. I want to have the iOS App Store. I want to be in part of the Apple ecosystem, and I don't blame you, because I'm the same way. It's like, oh yeah, that Android phone is cool. I guess I'll wait until that comes to an iPhone someday. And I see the same thing going on with Android phones as well. People waiting for more efficient architectures to make their way onto Android, or Android to implement more iOS privacy features. We're all just waiting around for the brand to adopt what we want, but this is really a software battle, which is why I guess I need to give some credit to Mr. Tim for prioritizing software as a service, even though I don't like all the memberships they're coming up with, and it sounds like they may restructure that soon due to some executive departures. But it was awfully genius of Apple to have the foresight to realize, like, a lot of this hardware is just going to start blurring together. You know, once you start imagining 5 to 10 years down the road, like the iPhone in 2030, like if the high-end iPhone has no notch, no cutout or anything, and then a few years go by and now you can buy the notchless, bezel-less, holeless phone for cheap, then what's going to be the hardware reason to get the $1,000 or $1,200 model? Can the display get that much brighter? Can the battery get that much longer? Does it need to fold in half for it to be worth it? Like, Apple was smart to realize, like, well, if we come up with more software services that are accessible across all devices, that might make more sense, because people are going to have a harder time justifying year-over-year upgrades. And that, I think, is going to progressively make the cheaper models from last year look progressively better and better. Like, that's why Apple doesn't sell the 13 Pro anymore, and that's why when the new iPhone 15 Pros come out later, they're gonna stop selling the 14 Pros, because they know that last year model is just too dang tempting. So getting more into Apple TV Plus revenue and iCloud revenue and Apple Arcade revenue, if there's still some of you paying for that, not counting Apple One, is probably the smartest way to sustain Apple's future. They're constantly trying to figure out what's going to kill our best-selling product, but I think this is the first time in Apple's history where they're kind of admitting that what's going to kill our best-selling product is us. There's not really a next big thing. There's not really another piece of technology that's going to replace the smartphone, in my opinion. Nothing will be as marketable, as simple, as cheap as just a glass rectangle that has an all-day battery life. Glasses aren't going to be able to replicate cameras or keyboards as easily. The social aspect of showing someone pictures or memes on your phone won't be as easy with glasses, and glasses aren't going to have the battery life or the affordability, and it doesn't seem like they're going to exist anytime soon either. But it's not all doom and gloom. The highlight of Apple moving more towards software services for their future does tend to mean that they don't need to worry too much about profitability on their hardware, which does mean over the long haul, we may see Apple start to price iPhones relatively lower. I'm not saying price cuts this year, but over time, they may be able to improve the hardware and give us great functionality in our watches and MacBooks or iPads. Just kidding, not the iPads, no. But everything else at a lower price because they don't need it to be as profitable because they're gonna make their money through other methods. So that may make the iOS or macOS experience worse because that may mean more in-app purchases, but the benefit does tend to mean cheaper hardware. That's partially why Google is usually so good at undercutting everybody else because hardware is not their primary source of profit. It's through search and through software services. So basically, I just see the iPhone's doom when Ross Young talks about how all displays between Androids and iPhones, and of course we know about periscope lenses and Qualcomm modems and super fast silicon, which can only get so much faster, all starts to become the same across phone lineups. The only thing we're going to be comparing is logos and chassis design, and I think Apple's going to probably crack the code on that this year. Rounded back, flat front. Sounds good to me. Everybody else like Samsung and Google will eventually catch up to that chassis design, and then this is just an Android versus iOS battle, and you're just going to be picking your app stores, but the EU might not even let them do that because they're going to force Apple to open up iMessage and open up their platform so that any alt store can show up there, in which case, does this all eventually blur into what company can make the smartphone color you like the most? If they've all got great cameras and great displays and great battery lives, and they have to be side-loading compatible, then I guess you just pick the company that makes the color you like. That's depressing, but what do you guys think? Feel free to let me know down in the comments below, and thank you to everyone on Tailosive Tech Pro supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps me out a ton, as does just watching these videos, so thanks again. This is your Apple Sleep here. I'll see y'all in the next one.